forever. The blizzard came down from the northern peaks without warning, swallowing the plains in white fury. Snow lashed sideways, driven by a wind so sharp it felt like it could peel skin from bone. The world shrank to a few desperate yards of visibility, and even that vanished with every gust. Horses refused to move. Birds had long disappeared. The territory belonged only to the storm now. Ethan Cole rode straight into it. He had no business being out there. Every instinct he had earned over years on the frontier told him to turn back, to find shelter, to wait it out. But instinct had never been the thing that ruled Ethan Cole. Responsibility did. The fence line on the north stretch needed checking after the last windstorm, and Ethan had promised himself he would finish the job before winter truly closed its jaws. Now winter had answered that promise with cruelty. His coat was stiff with ice, his gloves soaked through, his beard crusted white. His horse Thunder moved carefully beneath him, each step uncertain as snow drifted up to the animal knees. Ethan leaned forward, one hand resting against the horse's neck, murmuring calm words that vanished into the howling air. They were turning back when Thunder stopped dead. Ethan pulled the reins, squinting into the white chaos. At first he thought it was just another snowdrift shaped wrong by the wind. Then it moved. A figure lay half buried ahead, dark against the endless white. Ethan's heart kicked hard against his ribs. No one survived long in a storm like this. Not without shelter. Not without help. He slid from the saddle and nearly lost his footing as the wind shoved him sideways. Fighting it step by step, he reached the shape in the snow and dropped to his knees. It was a woman. Her coat was fine wool, not ranch tough. Snow had packed around her shoulders and hair, which spilled loose and dark against the ice. Her face was pale, lips blue, lashes rimmed with frost. She was breathing, but shallow, each breath a fragile thing. The storm seemed eager to steal away. Ethan did not hesitate. He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, then lifted her with effort onto Thunder's saddle. She weighed less than she should have. That worried him more than anything else. He climbed up behind her, anchoring her against his chest, and turned Thunder south, toward the faint memory of shelter. The ride back felt endless. The storm fought them every inch, howling like a living thing, clawing at them, trying to tear rider from horse and woman from warmth. Ethan focused on one thing only: keep moving. Do not stop. Stopping meant freezing. Stopping meant death. By the time the cabin came into view, barely visible through the swirling white, Ethan's hands were numb and his legs burned with cold. He slid down, nearly collapsing as he carried the woman inside. The cabin was small, rough-built, meant for a single man and a long winter. Ethan kicked the door shut with his boot, sealing out the worst of the wind, then laid her gently on the narrow bed. She did not wake. He worked fast, fire first. He coaxed flame from cold coals with shaking fingers, feeding it until warmth began to push back the cold. He stripped off her frozen coat and boots, careful, respectful, though time pressed hard against him. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned and rubbed her hands, her feet, her arms, forcing blood to move. Come on now, stay with me. You are not dying in my cabin. Minutes stretched. The storm roared outside like an angry beast denied its prey. Finally she gasped. Her chest rose sharply, and a faint sound escaped her lips. Ethan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He continued working, steady, patient, until color slowly crept back into her cheeks. When her eyes finally opened, they were sharp despite exhaustion. Gray. Clear. Alert in a way that surprised him. She tried to sit up. Easy now, Ethan said before remembering his words would sound strange to her ears after unconsciousness. He softened his tone. You are safe. Storm nearly took you. She stared at him, confusion flickering across her face before memory slammed back into place. Her breath quickened. The horse bolted, she said hoarsely. The snow blinded me. I tried to walk, but she trailed off, shaking. You are lucky, Ethan replied. I almost rode past you. Her gaze fixed on him then, studying his weathered face, the lines cut deep by sun and wind, the calm steadiness in his eyes. Luck had nothing to do with it, she said quietly. You came. He shrugged. Anyone would have. She did not answer that. Instead, she closed her eyes, exhaustion dragging her back down. Ethan stayed where he was, feeding the fire, watching her breathe, listening to the storm rage on. He did not know her name. He did not know where she came from. He did not know that the woman sleeping in his bed owned more land than any man in 3 counties. All he knew was that he had pulled a stranger from death, and the storm outside still had not finished telling its story. By morning, the blizzard eased but did not fully release its grip. Snow lay thick and unbroken across the plains, transforming the territory into a silent, white ocean. Ethan woke to the sound of coughing and turned quickly. She was awake, sitting up carefully, wrapped in blankets. Water, she asked. He poured her some from the kettle and helped her drink. Color had returned to her face, though she still looked worn, like someone who had walked a long road alone. My name is Clara Hale, she said once her voice steadied. Ethan nodded. Ethan Cole. She looked around the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings, the rifle by the door, the heavy work boots drying by the fire. You live alone. Most days, he replied. A pause settled between them. Then she said, I owe you my life. Ethan shook his head. Storm has a way of putting folks in the wrong place. I just happened along. Clara watched him closely, as if measuring the truth of him. Perhaps she saw the honesty there. Perhaps she saw the honesty there. Perhaps she saw something else. Either way, she said nothing more. Outside, the wind whispered across the frozen land. Inside, 2 lives that had never been meant to cross now shared the same warmth, unaware that the simple act of survival had set something much larger into motion. And far beyond the cabin walls, the largest ranch in the territory waited for its owner to return, carrying a story no one yet knew. The storm kept them prisoners for 2 more days. Snow stacked high against the cabin walls, sealing them inside like the lid on a coffin turned merciful. Ethan rationed firewood carefully, chopping what little he could reach outside during calmer moments, his breath clouding the air as he worked. Clara watched him from the doorway once, wrapped in a blanket too large for her, her eyes thoughtful and quiet. She was stronger than she looked. By the second morning, she insisted on helping, moving slowly but with determination, sweeping snow tracked inside, warming beans on the stove, folding blankets with hands that still trembled slightly from cold and exhaustion. You should rest, Ethan said, not unkindly. I have rested enough, she replied. People don't survive by lying still forever. That earned a small smile from him. They talked in pieces at first. Careful words. Safe subjects. The storm. The land, horses and fences, and the way winter changed everything it touched. Clara listened more than she spoke, asking questions that showed she understood ranch life better than most women Ethan had known, though she never said where she had learned it. He did not press. On the 3rd day, the sky cleared to a pale, endless blue. The land lay silent, buried under fresh snow that glittered like glass. Ethan saddled Thunder and helped Clara onto the horse, bundling her carefully. Where will you go? He asked as they prepared to ride. She hesitated just a fraction too long. South, she said. Toward the valley. That was a lot of valley. Ethan nodded anyway. He would take her as far as the roads allowed. Anything beyond that she would manage on her own. The ride was slow. Snow still dragged at Thunder's legs, and Clara leaned back against Ethan, her warmth a quiet presence he was too aware of. She smelled faintly of pine smoke and clean wool, It stirred something in him he had learned long ago to keep buried. They reached a ridge by late afternoon where the land opened wide, rolling toward distant hills dotted with dark shapes of cattle and outbuildings. Clara straightened. "That's far enough," she said. Ethan frowned. "You sure? It's still a long way." She nodded. "You have already done more than enough." He helped her down. For a moment, neither moved. "Thank you, Ethan Cole," she said. "I will not forget what you did." He tipped his hat. "Take care of yourself, Clara Hale." She mounted and rode off without looking back. Ethan watched until she disappeared into the wide white distance. He told himself it was just another winter story. A stranger helped, a life saved. Paths crossed and then separated, as they always did out here. He did not know that before sunset, Clara Hale would ride through iron gates marked with the emblem of a hawk in flight. He did not know that men would rush out to meet her, relief etched into their faces, calling her name with respect and urgency. He did not know that Willow Creek Ranch, the largest spread in the territory, had been holding its breath, waiting for its owner to come home. And he certainly did not know that his quiet life on the plains was already changing. 3 days later, trouble arrived at Ethan's door. It came in the form of a stranger on a black horse, wearing a fine coat and an expression that did not belong on honest land. The man studied Ethan's cabin like it was something already owned. "You Ethan Cole?" the man asked. Ethan rested a hand near his rifle. "Depends who's asking," the man smiled thinly. "Name's Mercer. I represent some folks interested in buying land in this area." "Not for sale," Ethan said flatly. Mercer's gaze sharpened. "Everything's for sale, especially land men can't afford to keep." Ethan felt the warning settle deep in his gut. "I said no." Mercer chuckled. "Suit yourself. Just thought you should know storms have a way of exposing weak foundations." He tipped his hat and rode away. That night, as the wind picked up again, Ethan thought of Clara Hale and the way she had looked at the land from the ridge. For the first time, he wondered who she really was. And somewhere miles away, Clara stood in the grand house overlooking Willow Creek Ranch, staring out at the darkening plains, thinking of a lone cabin, a quiet cowboy, and a debt she fully intended to repay. The territory did not forget Clara Hale's return. By the next morning, word had traveled across Willow Creek Ranch like fire through dry grass. Foremen reported in, riders came in from distant pastures, and the main house buzzed with activity that had been held in suspension during her absence. Clara moved through it all with quiet authority, listening more than she spoke, absorbing every detail. Cattle losses from the storm, broken fencing along the eastern boundary, a neighboring outfit pushing its grazing line farther than agreed, and then there was the matter of Mercer. She dismissed the others and stood alone in her office, hands resting on the heavy oak desk that had belonged to her father. The window behind her framed miles of land, all of it hers, all of it hard-won. Mercer represented the Caldwell Group. That name alone carried weight. They were not ranchers. They were collectors, buyers. Men who saw land not as something to tend, but something to consume. She had known they were circling. She had known I expected them to move so quickly. Or so crudely. When she thought of the blizzard, of waking in a strange cabin wrapped in borrowed blankets, Clara felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with cold. Ethan Cole had saved her life without knowing her name, her power, or her worth in acres and cattle. He had treated her as a person, not a prize. And now Mercer had gone to him. That would not stand. She summoned her head foreman, James Whitaker, a man who had been with the ranch since before Clara was born. "I want you to ride north," she said, quietly. "Find a man named Ethan Cole, lone rancher. Cabin near the ridgeline." Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "Trouble, protection," Clara replied. "And respect." Whitaker nodded. He did not ask more. 2 days later, Ethan Cole woke to the sound of hooves again. This time it was not a single rider. 3 horses stood outside his cabin, steam rising from their flanks. The men astride them wore good coats, well-kept boots, and expressions that told Ethan immediately this was no coincidence. He stepped outside slowly, rifle visible but not raised. "Morning," he said. Whitaker dismounted first. "You, Ethan Cole?" Ethan nodded. "That's me. James Whitaker," Whitaker said. "I work for Clara Hale." The name landed like a physical thing. Ethan kept his face still. "Does she need something?" Whitaker studied him for a long moment, then said simply, "She asked me to thank you." In person, one of the riders stepped forward and held out a small leather pouch. Inside were gold coins, more money than Ethan had seen at one time in years. Ethan closed the pouch and handed it back. "Didn't do it for money." Whitaker smiled slightly. "She said you'd say that." "Then why are you here?" Ethan asked. Whitaker's expression sobered, because men like Mercer don't like being told no, and because Clara Hale does not forget her debts. Ethan exhaled slowly. "So she does own Willow Creek." Whitaker nodded. "Largest ranch in the territory." Ethan felt a strange mix of surprise and something like amusement. "Figures." Whitaker continued. "He came to you because you're alone. Easy to lean on. That won't happen again." Ethan looked past them to the land stretching out behind his cabin. "I don't need protection." "Maybe not," Whitaker said, "but you have it anyway." They rode off shortly after, leaving behind a message without words. Ethan stood in the cold long after they were gone, thinking of Clara Hale not as the exhausted woman he had carried through a storm, but as a force moving quietly across the territory. He did not know if he liked that thought. Mercer did not like it at all. When the Caldwell group learned that Willow Creek had intervened, their interest sharpened into something more dangerous. They stopped pretending it was business. Pressure was applied where pressure always was. Banks, suppliers, water rights. And quietly, men began riding the boundary lines at night. Ethan noticed the tracks first. Hoof prints that did not belong. Fences tested. Cattle spooked. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Ethan found a fence post cut clean through. That was not a warning. That was a promise. He rode south the next morning. Willow Creek Ranch rose from the valley like a small town, larger than any spread Ethan had ever seen. Corrals stretched wide, barns stood solid and tall, and the main house overlooked it all with quiet confidence. Clara Hale met him on the porch. For a moment neither spoke. Then she smiled, just a little. "You look warmer than the last time I saw you." He returned it despite himself. "You look harder to kill than you did." Her laugh surprised him. It was brief, genuine. They walked together, talking plainly. No games, no posturing. "Mercer came to my place," Ethan said. "Tried to buy it." "I know," Clara replied. "He won't be back. He cut my fence." Her jaw tightened. "He will regret that." Ethan stopped walking. "This is bigger than me." "Bigger than you, maybe." Clara turned to face him fully. "This land has survived drought, fire, and men who thought strength was measured in force. It will survive this too." He studied her then, really studied her. The calm authority, the quiet fire beneath it. "You rode into a blizzard alone," he said. "That doesn't fit someone who hides behind others." Clara met his gaze without flinching. Neither does saving a stranger without asking her name. Something unspoken passed between them. From that day on, Ethan did not return to his cabin alone. He rode with Willow Creek men, learned their lines, watched their weaknesses, strengthened what could be strengthened. He slept in bunkhouses and ate at long tables, becoming part of something larger without ever asking permission. Mercer noticed. So did Caldwell, and when the first real shot was fired across the territory, no one could pretend anymore that this was about land alone. It was about who would stand and who would fall. The first shot did not come with warning or anger. It came with calculation. Ethan was riding the outer boundary at dawn when the sound cracked across the still air, sharp and final. The bullet tore through the fence post, inches from his shoulder, splintering wood and spraying snow. Thunder reared, screaming, and Ethan hit the ground hard, rolling instinctively as another shot snapped past where his head had been. This was no stray hunter. This was a message. Ethan stayed low, heart pounding, scanning the ridgeline through the drifting snow. A figure moved, distant and deliberate, already retreating. By the time Willow Creek riders reached him, the shooter was gone. They did not speak on the ride back. Clara listened in silence as Ethan told her what happened. Her face did not change, but something dark settled behind her eyes. "They want fear," she said at last. "They get resistance," Ethan replied. That night, Clara called every foreman, every senior hand, every man who had bled for Willow Creek. Lanterns swung in the barn, casting long shadows across rough faces and heavy coats. "No speeches," she said. "No dramatics. We hold our land. We record every boundary, every threat. We do nothing reckless." Ethan stepped forward. "And we stop riding alone." Heads nodded. From that night on, Willow Creek moved like a single body. Lines were doubled, watches set, lights left burning. The ranch made itself visible in a way predators hated. Caldwell responded by tightening noose elsewhere. Credit lines froze, feed shipments delayed, grazing access challenged by sudden paperwork and old claims dragged out of dusty offices. Pressure without fingerprints. Ethan saw the toll it took on Clara. She slept less, ate little. Still she stood tall, never letting the weight show in public. One evening, long after the others had turned him, Ethan found her in the office staring at maps spread across the desk. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said quietly. She did not look up. "I have always carried it alone." He rested his hands on the edge of the desk. "Maybe that's why they think he'll break." She finally met his eyes. "And you think I will not?" He smiled slightly. "I think they picked the wrong woman." For a moment something softened between them. Then the knock came. A young hand stood in the doorway, pale. "Miss Hale." "There's a fire. South pasture." They rode hard. The fire was small but deliberate, set along dry fencing where it would spread fastest. Men beat it back before it could take hold, but the message was clear. Clara watched the last embers die, her breath fogging in the night air. "They are escalating," Ethan said. "So are we," she replied. The next day, Clara made a move. Caldwell did not expect. She opened the ranch. Neighbors were invited in. Traders, families, even the territorial marshal. Willow Creek became impossible to isolate. Any violence now would be seen by too many eyes. Caldwell hated witnesses. Mercer rode in 3 days later, uninvited. He dismounted with a practiced smile, hands open in false peace. "Miss Hale, always a pleasure." "You are trespassing," Clara replied coolly. "Business never trespasses," he said. Ethan stood beside her, silent and solid. Mercer's eyes flicked to him. "You're far from your cabin, Cole." Ethan met his gaze. "Found better company." Mercer's smile thinned. "This doesn't end well for men like you." Ethan leaned in just enough for Mercer to hear him. "Funny. That's what weak men always say." Mercer left without another word. That night, as snow began to fall again, Clara stood on the porch beside Ethan. "Do you regret stopping that day?" she asked suddenly. Ethan thought of the storm, the white blindness, her frozen lashes. "No," he said, "I'd do it again." She nodded once. "Good." In the distance, thunder rolled, but there was no storm on the horizon. Only men, and the land was waiting to see who would claim it when winter finally broke. The territory held its breath. Winter loosened slowly, reluctantly, as if unwilling to release its grip without one final test. Snow melted into mud. Creeks swelled, and the land turned heavy beneath boot and hoof. It was in this uneasy season between seasons that Caldwell made his final move. Not through Mercer. Through the courts. Papers arrived at Willow Creek stamped with seals and signatures, challenging land claims that stretched back decades. Water rights questioned. Boundaries disputed. Old debts resurrected by men who had never set foot on the soil they claimed to own. Clara read every document herself. She did not panic. She prepared. Lawyers were summoned from the capital. Records unearthed. Deeds traced back through bloodlines and broken promises. Willow Creek had history on its side, and Clara knew it, but paper wars had a way of bleeding into real ones. The warning came at dusk. Ethan was riding the East Trail when he spotted smoke rising too dark, too straight to be natural. He pushed Thunder hard, cresting the hill just as the sound of shouting reached him. Caldwell men had come in force. Not an army, but enough. A dozen riders, armed, spreading through the lower pasture, driving cattle hard and fast toward the disputed boundary. They meant to provoke. Ethan did not hesitate. He fired a shot into the air. The sound cracked like a whip across the valley. Willow Creek riders appeared from every direction, moving fast, disciplined, silent. Horses thundered. Men shouted commands. Caldwell's men stopped, not because they were afraid, but because they were suddenly outnumbered and very visible. Clara rode in last. She reined in beside Ethan, her posture calm, her voice steady when she spoke. "This land is not yours." One of the Caldwell men laughed. "Court says otherwise." Clara lifted her chin. "Court will decide in daylight. You leave now." Tension stretched thin as wire. Then one man twitched. A gun went off. Chaos exploded. Ethan moved without thought, pulling Clara's horse back as bullets cracked through the air. Men shouted. Horses screamed. Dust and mud flew as riders clashed. It lasted less than a minute. Then the marshal's whistle cut through everything. Caldwell's men froze. The territorial marshal rode in with deputies flanking him, guns drawn, eyes hard. "Enough," he said. "All of you." By nightfall, arrests were made, charges filed, witnesses recorded. Caldwell's quiet methods had finally been dragged into the light. The territory had seen. Days later, the ruling came down. Willow Creek's claims stood. Caldwell's did not. Mercer disappeared before he could be questioned. Caldwell himself did not. He was taken under guard, his empire cracked beyond repair. When it was over, truly over, the land felt different, lighter. Spring arrived in earnest. Grass pushed green through black soil. Calves stumbled into the world on unsteady legs. Life resumed with a quiet determination that felt earned. One evening, Clara and Ethan stood where the storm had first tried to kill her. The ridge looked peaceful now. "You changed things," Clara said softly. Ethan shook his head. "You did. I just showed up when it mattered." She turned to him fully. "You could leave now. No one would blame you." He looked at the land, then at her. "I know." And yet he did not move. Clara's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed hope. "Willow Creek needs people who stay." "So do I," Ethan said. The wind moved gently across the grass, carrying no threat this time. "Only promise, if you've made it this far. Thank you for riding with us through storm and fire. For more powerful frontier stories of courage, survival, and unexpected bonds, make sure you subscribe to Hidden West Stories and stay with us on the long road west.